Let's use the ScanNCut to cut our applique pieces for some of the blocks on our 2 scoops bench pillow. I'm getting ready to start section 2 of the 2 scoops bench pillow, and there are several items or several blocks that have the SVG files to cut the applique pieces prior to starting the block. So I am doing a video on getting a couple of those cut out with my ScanNCut. I am using the online version of the canvasworkspace.brother.com, and I can go to start a new project. However, in order just to kind of clean up my screen for whatever reason, I usually just automatically click on my projects, and then it opens up to any of the saved projects that I have done before. Now, the few blocks that I'm going to do and cut all at once are going to be the twin popsicle, part of the ice cream bar, part of the banana split, and then part of the melted block, which are the 2 bowls of ice cream. So the first thing I'm going to do is come to New, and now I need to bring in the SVG files. On this top toolbar, I will select the SVG icon and choose File to find the files that I want to bring in. I will go to that main embroidery folder that I keep on my desktop and find my 2 scoops file folder, and then within that folder there is the folder with the SVG files. So that will open up all of the files that are available with SVGs for this project. Now I do want to note that some of these that show part A and part B, and that was the melted part A and part B, and the truck part A and part B. Those would be for the multiple hoopings if you have only a 5x7 as your largest hoop. So I won't be using any of the A and B parts. So I'm going to bring in, the first is the twin popsicle. I will double click, and that will select that SVG, and then I will select OK, and that puts that piece onto my screen or onto my mat. I'm just going to drag that off to the side for right now. Now I'm going to go back to the SVG, choose File, and I am going to get the ice cream bar. I have to open this each time to see them all, and so let's see if we can find. So I want to also note that the ice cream bar, there are 2 files for the ice cream bar, and one would be if you are using the ice cream bar with the stitched stick, and that's just in the stick of the ice cream bar is embroidery. There is also an ice cream bar that has the little button from the embellishment kit. And so if you have the embellishment kit, then you would most likely use the button for the stick. I think these 2 are actually the same because it's just the little ice cream part of the bar, but they do have them separate, so they might be a little bit different. So I am going to choose the ice cream bar. That's just the plain ice cream bar instead of the ice cream bar with the stitched stick because I have the embellishment kit. So I will double click on that. That is selected, and I will select OK, and that puts just that little piece of the ice cream bar. And I'll just drag that. I'll go back to the SVG and choose File. And then the next is the banana split. And that, I'm not sure you can see, but that has several pieces. So I can either double click or select open. It doesn't matter at all. It does the same thing. Here is the banana split file, and I will select OK. And you can see that puts several pieces. Now these are all separate pieces, and they all will be cut from different fabrics. For right now, I'm going to select all of them and just move it down. go back to the SVG and choose File. And the last is the melted, which is the bowls of ice cream. And so again, there's the melted part A and part B. That's again, if you only have a 5x7 hoop, you would need to do that large block into hoopings. And so I'm going to come down and choose the melted that says 6x10. And I will double click. That is selected, and I will select OK. And these are the pieces that will come over the bowl of the ice cream, and we'll talk about that, of course, when we do the block. Now, I do want to mention that these three are for, I believe, the vanilla ice cream, and this one is for the chocolate. And so these can be moved apart right now. I think I'm going to go ahead and move the ice cream scoops apart. Those will all be different ice creams, and then the banana. Now, I don't have to move them in a specific spot now because I can move them when I go to my ScanNCut, but I kind of want to make sure I have enough room to do all of these. So I think that looks good. So now I'm going to download, and it will ask, do I want to download to my computer or do I want to transfer it right to my ScanNCut? And I am going to choose to go directly to the ScanNCut. Now on the download to the PC, I believe you can then save it to your USB, and then you can take your USB and plug it into your ScanNCut, but I am just going to transfer it right to the ScanNCut. Now I do have my ScanNCut turned on, and so I will select ScanNCut Transfer. And it says the ScanNCut transfer is ready. So it's sent to my machine. So let's take a look at the machine and get all of this fabric set up on our mat so we can cut these out. So I've turned my machine on, and I will touch the screen. And now I need to find the designs that I sent over. So patterns means the patterns that are in the machine that came with the machine. So I actually need to go to Retrieve Data. And then there's different ways to retrieve it from the machine, from the cloud or Wi-Fi, directly from your computer if you've got it hooked up to your actual machine, or from a USB. I sent mine wirelessly, so I will choose that option. And then here is my little design that I sent over. You can see my little popsicle, ice cream, the banana, and all those. And so before I do any more editing to these, because I'm going to do one more thing before I cut, I'm going to kind of loosely get my material on the mat. Now it doesn't have to be in the exact position, because that's what's great about the ScanNCut, of course, is because we can scan it in. So I could put my fabric any which way. However, I'm going to place them about the same area so that I have just less moving around to do. So let's get the fabric on the mat. I have my fabric all down on my mat, and I wanted to note a few things. First, I am just using the standard tack mat, and so that's why I have used some painter's tape to just kind of hold down the fabric. The fabric mat is a lot stickier, but I've just been using my standard mat for now. And then when I originally pulled out the white piece that I thought was for the banana, I pulled out the longer piece of white that was just plain white. And then I thought that that actually is for the 3 whipped cream for the ice cream scoops. And so I changed it out for the smaller piece that actually has, it's hard to tell, but it has the cherry design on it. So I think that one's for the banana. And then for both pieces of white fabric, I took a Sharpie and kind of just designated the corners and, you know, kind of the edge of the material. When you scan this in white and even light, I'm hoping this should be okay. is sometimes super hard to see. And so while you can change the color of the scan, that affects the darker colors. And so since I have mostly dark colors, I just chose to put marks on the edge of the fabric so that I can see those and just do everything with one scan. So now before we start to cut, I need to make some changes to these designs. And so let's go ahead and go back to the machine and make those changes. So the changes I'm going to make to all of these applique pieces are to just slightly enlarge them. With the Kimberbell SVGs, I've noticed that it's just a little bit better when the satin stitch or the decorative outline is stitched around the appliques if these have been slightly enlarged. So I'm going to come to Edit and Object Edit and go to this first choice, which is to either enlarge or decrease the size of any particular item. So this little red box means that this piece is selected. And so I am just going to click and enlarge it 2 times, and you'll notice both numbers change. There is a setting where you can choose to just change the height or just change the width, but of course we want the whole entire piece to be changed. So now I just need to go through and select each item and just increase by 2 clicks. And with these little 3, you do have to do each separate. So now that they've all been changed, I will select OK. Select OK again, and one more time, OK. And now I'm ready to scan the mat, and then we can place these exactly where they need to be. I will load the mat between these 2 little edges and put it right up to the roller. And the first thing I need to do is select one of these side buttons, and it's the one that looks like a little grid, and that's going to load it. And it'll kind of do not really a whole scanning, but it just scans the mat in to know it's ready to go. So now what I'm going to do is choose this little button in the center, and that's to scan. And it will say that it's going to move, and so I will hit start. And so now let's take a closer look at the screen. So you can see that I can see all of the fabric, and I can see my white, and right off the bat I can tell that I was correct the first time when I pulled out the fabric for the banana. It was the longer piece. So I am going to remove my mat, and that's just hitting this button again and unloading it, and I'm going to change out this piece because this littler piece is for the whipped cream, so I need to change that back. So I put that longer piece back on, and now I have to redo the scan, of course. I have to load it, and so I will line it up and then select this button on the side. And now I can go ahead and scan it again. If you do any sort of changes, you always need to rescan. After the mat is scanned, you can see all of the pieces of fabric, and now I can move each one to where they need to be. And so in order to move this, I will just select any of the shapes, And using the stylish gets you some big movements, and you can do a lot with that, and it will be fine. However, if you need more precise movements, you would select the item, come to edit, then to this little arrow where the 4 arrows are. And these arrows now, if I need to move it up, you can see how tiny it moves and how precise you can get this movement. So I'm going to move that over a little bit. And then I can choose that one. I don't have to, go back out. I can choose each one and use this little arrow or the precise movements to move. I can also drag in this screen if I want. And so it's nice to try to put them into the centers, but you can see how it's easier to get some precise movements using the arrows if you need just tiny increments. Now these 3 again are separate. And so they don't need to stay, of course, in the same place because they are completely separate. They'll be 3 separate pieces. And then on this white piece, I only marked just a little line here because I have tape on all 4 sides. And so that kind of designates where I can put this banana. And so I think that's looking good. I am going to do 2 changes to this, but I need to get out of this menu. So when I'm satisfied that they're all about in the middle, I will select OK. And now I'm going to select this little ice cream for the ice cream bar. And I'm going to go to Object Edit. And now I'm going to go to this top right corner with this little arrow, and that's the rotate. And so here I can rotate, let's try 10. I want that up a little bit more. And then the same thing with this popsicle. I'm going to select this popsicle, and I'm going to go, and again, you can go 1 degree, 90 degrees, or 10. And then I think that fits a little bit better. I'm going to select OK. OK again. And I think I'm going to go back to this arrow and move this popsicle. It's still selected, just over a little bit and maybe down a couple notches. Select OK. And once I'm happy where everything is, I'll select OK again and then OK one more time. And now I need to tell the machine what to do. So I need to select, because you can cut, draw, you can do, several things. So of course I want to cut. And I need to make sure that this half cut is off. And the half cut is when you're cutting something with the backing that you don't want to go all the way through. For example, vinyl, adhesive vinyl, or the heat transfer vinyl. It would cut the vinyl and not through the paper if that's what you want. So for fabric appliques, of course, I want to cut through the entire thing. And so I need to make sure that that's off. So now you can test. The great thing with the ScanNCut is that it auto tests. And so the only other thing I'm going to do is change my blade. Right now I just have the standard blade, and that's what I actually have been cutting fabric with. And it's just a blade that you can use for vinyl or all paper, all sorts of things. I am going to change it to the rotary blade, and you can see that this actually looks like a little rotary cutter. And so it's round, just again like a rotary cutter, like you would cut fabric. So I will make sure that this Brother name is out. I will just drop it in and then close that to lock it in. So let's see how this rotary blade works. So I'm going to hit start, and it will come and test the mat and then go over the fabric and lower the blade so it knows how thick or how much pressure to put on the blade to cut. So it's done cutting, and I wanted to note that when you use the rotary blade, it takes probably a little bit more than double the time. And that's because if you notice, it doesn't just cut around the shape. Because the blade is round, it has to kind of do some cuts and picks up and, moves the blade. And so it does take longer than just the regular standard blade. Now, the first most important thing I think once you're done cutting is to not unload your mat. Because if it didn't cut all the way through for some reason, you can load it back in and just recut. So the first thing I'm going to do is check these to see if I can have that cut. And you don't really want to just yank the fabric because it can stretch. Mine probably wouldn't really stretch too much because I have everything backed with interfacing. But if you're doing especially just plain fabric, use the little scraper that comes with it. I'm going to try to use just my seam ripper to see, and you can see how well that banana cut. And so there's the cute banana, and I don't have to, trim around it. So let's make sure that all of these are cut. I'm going to have to try to find this one. All right, so far so good. I'm going to go through and see if they all cut. So about half cut completely good. I had a few that just were on literally like by a thread. So that I don't need to recut, of course. So I'll just take my scissors and snip, and it just didn't quite get that thread. And I mean, it's literally one thread. And I'll put that. And then let's see. There were a couple of these, again, not enough to send back through. And I can kind of see where to cut. And again, there's just a couple that have just a few threads. I think there was one right up here. Now, if it had mostly been like this with just a few cuts, I probably would have sent it back through. But these are just so small that I can just finish those cuts. And I think there's one more. Again, that's just literally like, I could probably just yank that and be done. Okay, so now I have all my pieces, and I think they look great. So let's take a look at them. So now it does say I'm finished cutting, and because I don't have to resend this in, I will select OK. And then to unload my mat, I'll just hit this grid, this little mat on the side, and that just unloads the mat, and I'll put that aside. So let's look at our pieces. We have the banana, and then the 3 little ice creams. I think the chocolate one on this side. Of course, that's going to overlap, and then so those are the sundae. Here's the little ice cream piece that comes out of the ice cream bar. This is the little chocolate piece from the little melted bowl of ice cream. And then these 3, I think it went this way, but of course we'll know exactly where to put them because we'll have placement lines. So those are those 3, and then the cute little popsicle. Now I did forget to do one that I was going to do. It was the cone for just the regular ice cream cone, but I'll do that when I get to that block. So now that all these are ready to go, I will put them back into their packets so that I won't lose them, and they'll be ready to go when I get to that packet. The last thing I do, and you can see that my mat doesn't look, dirty or doesn't have anything on it, and I think a lot of that is because I have that backed with interfacing, but I always make it a habit to just get, this is just a baby wipe, and I just lightly go over my mat when I'm done cutting. I don't do it after every cut unless it's, you know, maybe paper or something that might get linty every time. But when I'm done cutting for, you know, that day or that session, I just take time to wipe that down. I'll let that dry and then cover it. And that keeps my mat as clean as it can.